Keep breathing deeply. Earlier this week, with the spring equinox, we celebrated the earth, one with us, one with all, turning. We're very fortunate to be members of a spiritual community with people who help us to appreciate our spiritual kinship with all beings. This is my favorite time of year, I have to say. I love luxuriating in the longer daylight. Every day for the next 3 months, we get more and more and more of it. It feels expansive, abundant, nurturing. Not only humans, but the earth herself seems to be engaged in joyful celebration as new plants, new flowers, new life bursts forth. I thoroughly enjoyed this morning, eating breakfast, looking out the back window, and watching bluebirds coming and going, feeding babies. And then walking outside to get in the car, seeing little spring blossoms. Ooh, that wasn't there yesterday. Look at that. It's joyful. It's just really joyful. You may wonder why it might be worth spending a Sunday morning thinking about simple things like plants and new life. It's part of the abundance with which we're blessed. Nature is abundant. And when we forget about paying attention in the moment, feeling our oneness with all that is bright and beautiful, it's too bad. It's sad. It's really sad when we fail to open our eyes, open our minds, feel the beauty, feel our gratefulness for all that we are blessed with. It's very sad, and it's part of oneness. It's our choice whether and when we will turn again and turn again with the earth and with the seasons and go back into our awareness of oneness and find the beauty and the love that is pouring through us, is flowing abundantly in our lives. We can either notice or not notice. Which do we choose? Which do we choose in each moment? Sometimes we get overtaken by feelings about what's going on in the physical, and those feelings are very immediate and have big hooks on them, make it hard to peel them off. But the possibility is always there for us to go back to that abundant, loving, beautiful, joyful choice of knowing our oneness. Spiritual practice calls us to recognize divinity in the whole physical universe. And the practice of resonating in oneness enriches our lives as we experience our power as human beings. Interesting thing about that power, we apparently are often tempted to hand it off, to ask somebody else to take it on, and we'll follow you, we'll do what you say. And there's any number of entities willing to think in our place. You know, if you think about the history of wars in the world, a war is not one guy arguing with another guy. A war is about one tribe arguing with another tribe. A war is even more often about a collective entity, a human-built entity, such as an institution, or a corporation, or an ideology, taking charge. Stepping in and pretending to be human. Nothing that humans have made has the ability or the potential, as every being does, to attune to oneness, to know the sacred, to know the flow, to know the beauty that exists in every, I don't even know what to call it, every particle, every wave of creation. Only human beings can do that. Only human beings can make decisions based on awareness, based on consciousness. And it is our responsibility to stay focused in our humanness, in our beingness, in our divinity, and to come back and turn and turn, and to be steady in our personhood, our beingness. We have teachers to follow who have bravely stood up. I know that the morning discussion group is considering one of those now, Joanna Macy, Wendell Berry. These people have heroically stood up and said, the earth is a part of creation. We are one with the earth and with every being of the earth. That is our responsibility as a human being, to be aware of that, to pay attention to what our fellow beings are telling us about how well they're doing, and to do what we need to do to assure that the earth is nurtured, that the climate is nurtured, that all beings are nurtured. As a homeopath, I learned a long time ago that when we feel symptoms, something hurts or something doesn't feel right, that's our inner innate life force telling us that something's not right. This needs to be addressed. That's what pain is all about. That's what discomfort is all about. What isn't working? And the only response that makes a difference is to pay attention, to be aware of that discomfort and say, oh, what's going on here? What is the message? What can I change? Who's it up to? Me. These kinds of responses are always up to us. Not in isolation, but as members of creation, as members of community. It's not just, we're not just one individual. We're just not all boxed up nicely with a stamp on us to be sent somewhere. You know, we're part. We are enfolded in beingness. And when we are willing to act as a part of that beingness, we can have an effect. We can make change happen. And it's down to us in our individuality. In one of his meditations this week, Father Richard Rohr wrote, quote, "On spring and summer mornings, I love to go out early and walk in my little garden. If I can somehow let the roots and tendrils of those familiar plants reconnect me with the givens of life, not the ideas about life, but the natural world, what is, I experience extraordinary grounding, reconnection, healing, and even revelation." We don't have to go far. We don't have to spend hardly anything to do this repeatedly, either within or outside. A moment in that awareness. That gives us all those gifts. What's not to like? In addition to enjoying this spring season, I want to share with you, I'm also enjoying the love of a puppy. I just feel so grateful, so often. She weighs 3.5 pounds. She's all white. She's 3.5 months old. I don't know how big she's going to get, not very. She is constantly engaged in interacting, exploring, enjoying, seeking. Oh my gosh, what she can get into in a minute is unbelievable. She plays. She's so tiny that when she barks, she still sounds like a squeaky toy. What's that? When anybody comes, they just immediately fall in love. As I watch her, I see how the law of mind action, that divine law, works not just for humans, but also for other creatures. She came, little tiny thing that she was, with a definite idea of who she is in the world. What we envision happens, what she envisioned happens most of the time. She's the boss of the other dogs. She barks at them, they go away and leave her whatever it is that she wants. And we're training ourselves to use our human judgment and understanding and compassion and wisdom so that somehow we get to remain the boss of her. But it's an amazing experience to watch the knowing in this little bitty thing and how sure she is of exactly what's hers to do and to be in the world, in every moment. It's being an an experience of allness, of knowing community, of knowing commonality. So there's so much to enjoy in knowing allness. And there's also sadness and responsibility and questioning. You know, like, should I have done something? It kind of looks like maybe I should have. Oh, this is terrible. When something happens to another being with whom we have connected. And we've had an example of that in the last couple of days also. A couple of nights ago, Nancy's cell phone rang at 11:45 p.m. You know, when your cell phone rings at that time, it's either a wild mistake or it's not good news. And Nancy answered, and the person on the other end was a Durham detective. And the detective asked if Nancy knew a certain person. It was somebody Nancy has known since her early 20s. So she said yes. And then there was silence on the other end. And Nancy said, is she okay? And the detective said, well, no. And Nancy watches a lot of detective shows, so you know what her next question was. Is she dead? Yeah. Yes. Oh boy. So there was a short conversation. There was apparently no foul play. They couldn't find any connections, any family, anything. And I was rather shocked when the police officer asked Nancy, after a few minutes of conversation, would you take charge of burying the body? I didn't expect her to say yes, but she did. Turns out she knew this person really well for 50 years. I knew the person existed, but she has not been in touch with her in at least 10, 11 years, even though she lived in Durham. And so obviously I was curious, and it felt really surreal to suddenly find myself sharing in the responsibility for disposing of the human body of somebody I had never met, didn't know the name of. Like, okay, in the context of oneness, this makes sense. You know, it is a connection. It is, on some level, a responsibility to see that someone gets buried. If it's somebody that you've known for a long time, even if it's somebody you weren't really in touch with. Turned out, I've learned a lot since, it turned out that Nancy and this woman and another woman met in the 60s in New York and found out they were all born on the same day in the same suburb of Cleveland. So they had a bond, you know, and they stayed closely in touch for a very long time. And wondering, you know, what on earth, how can this happen to somebody? It appears that a combination of depression and dementia just took over and she couldn't do her life. How did the police find her? Her car had been parked across 2 parking spaces in the apartment parking lot for a very long time, and nobody had seen her in, they said, at least a month. And when Nancy told me about her afterwards, I realized this woman had been profoundly alone. She had been very, very difficult to be friends with. She constantly asked for help, and then she turned around and attacked the people who helped her and drove them away. several people remembered she had a son that she hadn't talked with in ages. And collectively, what they could remember was, his name is John and he lives in Boston. From how many years ago, who knows? So Nancy and a friend went over to the apartment and dug through a bunch of papers and at least found the son's last name and date of birth, which they gave to the police. And I looked it up. There's 32 guys in the United States with that name, and the one that's the right age lives in Boston. So I'm hoping they can find him. Will he take the responsibility? I don't know. Will we bury her body? If it comes to that, yes, we will. Because it's just part of being human, that you don't want somebody's body to just be, I don't know what happens to them. But, you know, that she should at least be honored for having existed. Seems important. That's part of oneness too. You know, there are all kinds of other shocking, way big experiences that we're aware of. And not to us individually, but to us as a collective. Remaining aware in oneness and staying in touch with what it means to be an expression of divine love. And making the effort to take that responsibility is part of oneness too. You know, helping Syrian refugees, Rohingya refugees, in whatever way we can. If it's prayer, great. If it's something else we can do, fantastic. But, you know, the ancient question, am I my brother's keeper? If you think of it from the standpoint of oneness, what does the answer have to be? Yes. Yes. So, as you reflect on your favorite places and companions, for enjoying the divine nature of every being in the universe, I'd like to ask you this week to devote time to consciously being in a natural setting and enjoying the renewal of life and energy that you will feel through that mindful experience. And I also invite you to look around and see one place where your individual expression of I am can make a difference to another divine expression. One little place. And take that action. You'll discover the blessing of wholeness. You'll know the joy that oneness is. In all giving, because of oneness, we are helping ourselves. Even as cosmos, meaning we, experiences an additional bit of joy and love. There's no I and you. There's no us and them. All there is in spirit is I am. That's it. And so it is.